welcome to Comics with Dan. This is the Comics Commute number 11. So the last 2 weeks I've had some problems with my pull list. I think the change that DC was making to shipping on Wednesdays must have had something go wrong with the distributor, although none of my books came in for the last 2 weeks. So hopefully hopefully tomorrow the stack waiting for me at the comic book store is pretty large, because it'll have the last kind of 3 weeks of books. But I still managed to do some reading. I finished Die, which I don't know if I had finished that at this point last week, but that was pretty good. I won't touch on that too much. I think I touched on that enough in the last video. I read Action Comics Rise of Metallo, which is the first trade paperback for the Dawn of DC era of Action Comics. Another Philip Kennedy Johnson one, which I feel like this channel the last couple weeks has just been a Philip Kennedy Johnson fan account. So I'll touch on that a little bit. And I read Identity Crisis by Brad Meltzer. Brad Meltzer. Which I'll touch on that a little bit as well. And then I did a little bit of reading. Some Sonic with the boys, and I read some more Tales to Astonish. I also read at least the beginning of Grant Morrison's Batman and Son hardcover. I try really hard to get into Grant Morrison's work, and I just can't do it. I've read Damien's Origin before, and he's the absolute worst. And I get that's the point of the character, and he's a well-created, well-developed character, but I just dislike him so much that I don't have a fun time reading any books with him in it. Although he's gotten a lot better, to be fair. So I'll give him that. Yeah, so to start off, Rise of Metallo. It was just kind of standard Superman fare. You kind of see the results of Superman bringing back the War World refugees. It's definitely an allegory for some current political situations going on in the United States, which is fine. You know, comics are inherently political. But I think part of the problem with this volume is that presents that as a problem, sort of a background problem, but it doesn't really dive that much into it. You know, if there's going to be a comic with some political issues in it, then I kind of want them to dive into it and look at why each side is taking the position that each side is taking, which that doesn't really do that here. The main villain in this, and so skip over this if you don't want any spoilers, but the main villain in this it's Metallo for some of it, but then it turns out to be Cyborg Superman, which I love. Cyborg Superman. I'm a big Death of Superman, Return of Superman guy, but after reading that and then reading Jeff Johns' Green Lantern, where he also was a big player, and now reading this where he's a big player, it's just getting to be a little tiring to use the same villain over and over again. And maybe it's just, and I've read those fairly far apart, so it's not just that I read them all back to back, although Green Lantern and this volume of Action Comics I read back to back, so maybe that's part of it. But I mean, I feel like there's other villains that Superman can explore a bit more. It wasn't bad by any means. It was just sort of standard fare. There wasn't a whole lot of meat to it. It wasn't a big giant epic like Warworld was. So I'm pretty sure on League of Comic Geeks I gave it 3.5 stars. So seems fine to me. So I also read Identity Crisis, which I know is a big. It's a very hotly contested book where people have some big opinions on it, whether they're negative or positive. Some people call it the best Justice League story. Some people call it an abomination. I'm sort of just in the middle. It was a good mystery. I didn't see the end coming, to be honest. I won't do any spoilers, just in case anybody hasn't read it, and I'll keep it PG because some of this is, and I think probably one of the biggest problems that people had with the book is a little more mature. So all I'll say on that topic is that I think that what was done to Sue Dibney was completely unnecessary for the narrative, and I don't think that it helped tell the story. I don't think it was appropriately explored. We hardly got any introspective into how Ralph was feeling, and in fact, once all this was revealed, once all that happened to Sue was revealed to the reader, we get zero insight into what Ralph is feeling and thinking. And half the story is told from Green Arrow's perspective, who at the end of the story ends up looking like a lunatic. My understanding is that Meltzer is a novelist turned comic book writer. You can correct me on that. But it does sort of feel that way, because I don't know the base of the story, right? If you describe the story to somebody, you could see why they would be interested in it and why it would be really good. But then the way that it's written, it feels really disjointed, and I'm not usually a guy that gets all bent out of shape about characterization, but it sort of feels like he had no idea who these characters were, to a certain extent, and it was more of I have a story I want to tell, and I have this pool of superheroes to choose from, so let me just drop a few of these characters into the preconceived roles that I have, and go from there, and then let's kill several people in order to increase shock value. So now, honestly, to be honest with you, now that I say it out loud, it really wasn't very good. And now that I've had a chance to think about it a bit more and look at it through that lens, I don't think it was particularly well done. I can admire the plot and the mystery side of things, but apart from that, it was a pretty poorly constructed story. I know that there's a term in comics called fridging, and I'll let you look that up. Maybe I'll do a short on what that means. Just because, again, I don't want, if there are any young ears listening, I don't want to dive into what that exactly entails. But to keep it as PG as possible, fridging is based on something that happened to Kyle Rayner's girlfriend or wife or partner or whoever. And it's where essentially something bad happens to a female character in order to advance the plot of a male character, right? and it generally has to do with something happening to a female character to advance the plot of a male character. It can happen the other way, but more often than not, it's that a female character is affected. That is very, very much what I think Meltzer was attempting to do with Sue Dibney. But that was a swing and a miss. So even his attempt to do that, which I don't see as a good thing, was not done. Even that wasn't done well. I think that I would say that you should read Identity Crisis, just because I would consider it to be an important part of DC comic lore, especially considering the significant deaths that happen. So I would definitely read it, but I wouldn't buy it. I borrowed mine from the library, and I would probably just read it so that I wouldn't expect too much of it, let's put it that way. I wouldn't expect a phenomenal book that'll blow you away. So the boys and I got through the first 4 issues of Sonic the Hedgehog from IDW Publishing, and they like it so far. They obviously, being kids, they're big character fans, so they liked, obviously, Sonic introduced in #1. I believe Tails was also introduced, and then they finally got around to seeing Sonic. A few other characters show up. They finally got around to seeing Knuckles, and then a few other characters show up. So they're enjoying that part. At the end of the first 3, there's this mystery on, well, if Dr. Eggman's not controlling his badniks, then who is? And so they sort of mysteriously end each issue with Dr. Eggman's chair, where you can't tell who's sitting in it, and they're convinced that it's him. But then we see him at the end of issue #4, and he is not sitting in his chair, to my understanding. Now I obviously already know how this plays out, so I'm trying not to spoil anything for them, but I think that they're really interested in that sort of mystery side of it. Like I said last video, to be honest, a lot of the layouts are just, it's really hard to understand what's happening. I mean, even for me as an adult. So I think that's chalked up to sort of poor layout planning. It's probably pretty difficult to do that when the characters are, supposed to be moving so fast. So, give them the benefit of the doubt there. But yeah, so we're waiting on the next set of 4 issues from the library, so we'll see how that goes. I made it through the first sort of storyline in Tales to Astonish for Namor and Hulk. I really liked the narration surrounding Namor. I mean, it's the silly Silver Age stuff, but he's constantly talking about himself. He's the Blood Prince, the avenging son. He's very confident in himself. My only real complaint with the Namor story is that Dorma, his lady, is basically, she tries to get with Namor at the beginning. He says no, so then she betrays him to Krang, and then decides, oh, I made a mistake. And Namor's like seemingly fine with it. He honestly doesn't give it a second thought, which is a little dumb, but you can't look into it too much. I think that I think it's still a good story. Namor, he's on a quest to get Neptune's trident, and I think it's Neptune's trident. Pretty sure it is. And gives up the quest to save Dorma, which is is admirable. But again, I go back to the fact that she's the reason he's in this situation to begin with. So he ends up getting it anyway because Neptune decides that he's worthy because he gave up the quest to go save Dorma. So I think that's really well crafted story. I enjoyed that piece. The Hulk side, the Hulk's depressed. I didn't realize it went back that far that Hulk was just beside himself about being the Hulk. It seems to be just a recurring theme with the character, and it makes sense, right? I mean, you get turned into a monster, you're going to be depressed too. But he is beside himself in regards to having been transformed into the Hulk. But that sort of internal battle that he's having with himself is really interesting and really well done. So that was pretty good as well. I'm excited to see where those continue to go. I think that's all I have for this episode of Comics Commute. My polls this next week, I mean, I'm going to have Transformers, I'm going to have Rook Exodus, I'm going to have Nightwing, I'm going to have a book called 7174 AD, which was sort of added to my pull list on a whim. It's printed on newsprint, which is a weird reason to add something to your pull list, but I'm excited for it. And I'll put the other books on the screen for anyone interested. I'm excited for them. We'll see how it goes. I also am putting out a video, hopefully around the same time that this one will go out, about the new line of comics from DC called Absolute Comics. It's nothing, that piece is nothing official. Bleeding Cool has leaked some information about the fact that it's called Absolute Comics and that Scott Snyder's going to head up the project. But I have a video coming that I'm going to talk about what I'd like to see in terms of book announcements and creative team announcements for Absolute Comics. So I'm really looking forward to that one. So keep your eyes peeled for that. And otherwise, make sure you like the video. Make sure you subscribe if you like watching these, if you're not already. And thanks for watching.